All right, we start this chapter assuming that you're already familiar with JavaScript object notation. So in this example, we want to create a Power Automate object. And to create a Power Automate object, we need a JSON object to put it inside the initialize variable action. So first, we need to start by creating a JSON object. To do that, you can do it directly inside Power Automate, but I always prefer to avoid that, and I'd rather do it in a text editor and then validate it just to make sure that I'm feeding Power Automate with a valid JSON object. There are lots of ways to verify a JSON code, but there are many online solutions like codebeautify.org. If you go to /JSON viewer, you can create your JSON object here, and just by pushing validate, you can make sure that the JSON statement that you wrote is correct. So for example, for this one, I put something like first name, and I give it a value as Ali Reza, comma, next property is going to be last name, and this property is going to be my last name. And finally, I want to add another property called age, and this value is a number. I make it 47, and I just can click on validate, and you see it's a valid JSON object. So we've done with the first action, which is create a JSON object in text editor. We just created and validated it. So now we need to get this one and pass it to Microsoft Power Automate. So I go to the flow.microsoft.com, I click on create, and I want to create an instant flow, and I call it JSON object demo. Manually trigger a flow, I click on create, and I need to create a new step, and this one, just like before, I go to variables and I initialize a variable. The variable name is going to be my first object. The type, obviously it's going to be an object. The value that I want to put here is going to be the value that I created in my JSON beautifier. I come back here, copy and paste. So what I have here is a valid JSON object. Great. Now let's save it and see what we got. Let me add a new step and I call it compose. I just want to see what I get inside this variable. So I click inside this box and I select my first object. Save. So we're good. Let's test it. So by now we created a variable of type object, and we assigned our JSON object that we created in the previous step to this variable. Now let's test it. I'll perform the trigger action and I click on test, run flow, and done. So now if I click on compose, you see I have a value like this: first name, last name, and age. Perfect. Now imagine I have this object and I want to have access to the values inside it. So for example, I want to know that person's first name or last name. How can I do that? There are different ways to get those values and work with them. One of the easiest way is to write an expression and put a variable name dot properties. But in a beginner course, I never get into expression writing. I think it's going to be a little bit too scary for people that they want to start working with a visual design tool for workflows. So is there a better way? Obviously. If I click on this plus, now I can have an action that can actually convert this JSON object and break it into its building properties. So I call parse JSON and I pick it up. So we are in our last step. We have the values inside one single variable, but now we want to retrieve every single property inside that JSON object. So content should come from the variable that we initialized here, which is my first object. But this parse JSON needs a schema to know what is inside that object. So for this one, we need to create our schema. Schema can be created using a data payload. So if I go back here and get a copy of the data that we have, this is just a sample data, I can come back inside Power Automate, and if I click on Generate from Sample, I can paste the JSON object here, and I click on Done. Probably you remember in your JSON crash course that I mentioned that there are always tools that they can create the schema out of the sample data. And this is one of those examples. Parse JSON will do that for you. So once it is done, life is a lot easier. So inside this compose, instead of reading the entire object, I can click on it and now see the beauty that parse JSON has for us. So I can have first name, last name, and age. I really don't need to write a single line of expression code. I can pick first name here, maybe a hyphen after that. I can put last name here, and I can put another hyphen, and maybe I can add age here. Fantastic. Let me save it and test it. Test, run flow, and done. Let's see. So initialize variable created a variable that contains this object. Parse JSON using a schema helps us get the content and break it into pieces. We really don't care what it produces. What we care about is that now it has a schema that matches the data that comes inside this control. So basically now when we go to compose, we get the pieces separately. So I get first name hyphen last name hyphen age. And so easily we can work with the JSON objects completely visually without writing a single line of code. But why is it so important? Why am I bringing something like this in a beginner course? The answer is simple. Imagine you're working on a workflow, and this workflow requires some hard-coded values, like for example, approving manager, like for example, website URL, SharePoint URL site, like for example, a SharePoint list name. And these things may change in the future. So instead of really going through different elements and different mailbox, or let's say send mail action or SharePoint insert list items, and hard code the list name or the URL, we can go to initialize variable and put all these configuration information in one place. Immediately after that, we use parse JSON, and wherever we need those values, we just use them. Now, in the future, if, for example, the approving manager name changes, we can just change the approving manager here or his or her email address here, and the rest of the flow will work perfectly. So this is just one variable that we call it probably flow configuration. And all the configuration elements that we need, we just put it in one place and we use it in different places. As simple as that. Of course, there is a lot more that you can do with objects, but let's leave it at this level for our beginner course about Power Automate. Now, let's get into a short quiz to test your knowledge before we move on to the next section.